We have now the conference by Maribel Hernandez. And let me introduce you Maribel, an excellent colleague and friend and a fantastic scientist. She comes from computer science and got her PhD in mass plan bioinformatics and with a postdoc in graph theory for evolution. And she was later a postdoc in Brazil, and then she had a position in the National University in Mexico in mathematics. And for the last 2 years, she's in CINVESTAV. She is working in many of the things that she'll tell you some about. But one of the things that she's secretary of the Mexican Network of Bioinformatics, and she's also in the core board of the Ibero-American Network in Artificial Intelligence for Big Data. But she said, do not forget that I've been an mentor in these 1,000 features New York Academy of Sciences for years. So it's 1,000 features in the New York Academy of Science. And she's someone that really goes out of her way to support women in science through different workshops and mentoring. And I'm very happy to have her here with us.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for still being here or coming back. I want also to thank all the organizers of this meeting. That has been wonderful. I have learned a lot during these 2 days. This is my first time in this university and with all of you, and I am really, really happy and honored to be here. As Gabby already introduced me, I am mainly working on bioinformatics. Mainly, I develop methods and algorithms to solve several problems in bioinformatics. But I'm very much interested in networks, and because I have a background in because I have background in graph theory, so I have been working on other projects that are not necessarily related to bioinformatics, but that this background has helped me to be in these different fields. And one of these is working with mobility networks to study human behaviors. So what I'm going to introduce to present today, or what I would like to share with you, is some insights and some explorations of data using network approaches. Okay, now first I like to quote one of my friends who always uses this sentence to start any presentation, because he works on complex systems, and to say that life is complex. So here we have seen a lot of talks where we have actually observed that there is lots of complexity in the system. So probably I don't have to go much into these details of like why life is complex, but because we have a lot of systems, like from the brain or organization of individuals, populations, that drive several systems that cannot be like studied easily, let's say, and that's why we call them complex systems. And these complex systems can be many times studied with complex networks. And networks are everywhere. So we are doing a network at the moment, right? So I got invited by Mina or by Gabby, and then we are meeting each other, and then we are like starting having new connections. And this is how many other networks work. So I want just to introduce this talk by saying that I will be working mainly, I'm going to be talking mainly about networks. Okay. Maybe it's the battery. Yeah. Okay. So so the question is like, what about networks? So we have biological networks, neural networks, and organization networks, social networks, but we also wonder like what about networks for human behavior? How can we describe human behavior with networks? So there have been a lot of studies with studying networks in the last years, especially a lot because of COVID, right? People started looking at how people behave with the lockdown, or how people change their behaviors with lockdown. What were the sources of segregation, marginalization, and also, for example, for the way the pandemic behaved, or how the virus was spreading. But in general, these studies have been there for a very long time, but they just like carry more importance in the last years because of COVID. And this is these papers that I'm putting here, they're just examples of such studies. And then we were wondering whether these policies that governments were imposing during the lockdown were actually working. And we were asking, like, how can we measure this social distancing, for example? Or we were asking, like, did people really decrease meeting with other people? Like, did they really stay at home? Or did people actually stay in and didn't go out for dinner? Or this mobility was reduced? And many of these plots that you are seeing here, you could see it everywhere in TV, right? Like, you were checking whether, okay, in train seat stations, did mobility reduce in workplaces, in residential? So if mobility increased in residential areas, it's because we stay more at home, and things like this. So we also were curious about how these patterns in Mexico work. And this was a very preliminary study that we took the city of Cuernavaca, which is in the south of Mexico. Probably some of you have heard of it. It's called the city of the eternal spring because it's always very warm. Probably it's like the twin city to Miami, maybe. And we were studying mobility. So how much people were moving before the pandemics and then during the pandemics, and then how it was changing, for example, with important days. Like for Mexicans, Mother's Day is very important, and we expected to see an increase in mobility in those days. But how we study mobility? So first we need to do the construction of these networks. So all of you have cell phones, right? Or many of you, or most of you have cell phones. And whenever you are working or walking or moving from one place to the other, you also will have your cell phone with you, and the cell phone is like pinging, right? Like ping, 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 so sending signals all the time. So the companies that provide us with the service of cell phones basically collect this data and give to each cell phone an identifier and knows like the timestamp and the latitude and longitude of every ping. That's basically what they do. There are other companies that buy this data to the local companies or the companies in the country, and basically homogenize this data, anonymize this data, put a little bit of noise, so then we cannot really locate one person or track this person. And then that's the data they provide to whomever wants to do this type of studies or other type of studies. And this is the data we work with. It's terabytes of data, like big, this is one of these big data sets. And we have to process this just for Mexico, just for the country of Mexico. We have every day 0.5 terabyte of data, more or less. And we collected this data for 2 years, or for 2020 to 2021. And how we construct these mobility networks is based on the regions that we are interested in studying. So here I'm putting an example. here you can see the map of Mexico City. And Mexico City can be divided in regions as you like. So one way to do it is divide the region, the city in AHEBs, what is called in AHEBs, which is a basic geostatistical area, or you can divide it in polygons. And these polygons were actually defined by Uber, and these polygons are hierarchical. So basically what it means is that there are bigger polygons that have smaller polygons and so on. So you can have polygons of, the smallest polygon is of less than 1 square meter, and the biggest one can be the size of a county, for example. So this is what we do. We divide the region of interest in one of these two areas, and then we start building this network. This work of course hasn't been done by myself. We have a really big team, great people, and especially the one who was motivating this work was Plinio Guzman, who's here in this picture, who's a great data scientist, currently actually working here in the US. And he put all the back end to make this project possible. So what we do is basically we take one of these regions or areas. In this case, I'm representing this with this H3, and this one becomes a node. And whenever I observe that there is a device that is moving, which is a proxy for a person from one place to the other place, I say that there is mobility from region A to region B, because I see this device moving from one place to the other. Okay, and then I do this during the whole day. So I observe all the devices that are moving. So basically for each device, you have a time series, but you can track where they are. And then basically we have a network where nodes are represented by this H3 or these AHEBs. And ages are directed because we know from where we are moving from one place to the other. And these are weighted networks because the age is weighted, telling us how many people we observe moving from one place to the other. So this can be done every minute or every 10 minutes or every hour, but we do it basically for one full day. Once we observe this, so basically I already explained the construction, but basically it's during the whole day, but you can do it in the period you like. And that's how we build our network. Now, once we already have this network, we want to analyze patterns or see what we see. So first thing is, in Mexico City, we wanted to see where do we observe more visits. The greener regions here, the greener areas are the places where we receive more visits, and the red areas are where there are less visits. So as you can see already here in this map, like green areas are agglomerated in the center of Mexico City, which is actually, for those who have been there, it's downtown. So that's where we receive the more visits, and in the periphery we have less visits. The periphery of the city. We also wanted to see where where occurs like high mobility, but in longer distances. In Mexico City, is very common. In my case, for example, I was living in the north with my parents when I was a bachelor student, and I had to travel 2 hours to get to the university. And this is very common in Mexico City. Like most of the people, when they say, oh, this is very close, it's like because it's half an hour by car or by public transport. So what we do is we travel long distances, and actually with these networks, we could observe these dynamics because we can see that the longer, so if you see some lines there, some red lines are the paths, let's say, or the routes that are the heaviest ones. So that means there is like lots of transit, very heavy transit, like crossing the whole city. So here I'm just highlighting the ages with the highest weight. So once we have like some exploratory studies on these networks, we wanted to say, so what do these networks tell us about human behavior? It's very common that one of the things that we do when we study networks is to calculate the degree distribution, right? Like where in the axis, you observe the degree of each node, like 1, 2, 3, 4, up until the maximum degree. And the y-axis is the amount of nodes that have that degree. If you observe before the lockdown, this degree was basically homogeneous, was constant, but when there was a lockdown, this distribution changed, having nodes or places where there were with fewer connections. We have more nodes with fewer connections. That means like people stop like going everywhere and just stay like connecting with some nodes. But I always compare it with the 10th of May, which is Mother's Day, as I already said, because where you expect that this pattern changes. And this is actually what happened. And that's what I want to show you here. And these 3 dates that I chose to show you, I have the maps. So one is, that's February, that's before the pandemics. That's when we are in lockdown, so the mobility reduced a lot. And then that's Mother's Day, where everybody went out to celebrate Mom. That's very important. But we wanted to study as well, like some social issues that might exist in the city. I was reading papers that here in the US, you have more racial segregation, where when they study mobility, they realize that segregated neighborhoods are mainly related to race, like Black neighborhoods or people or where neighborhoods where Asian people lived, they were segregated in terms that people just don't go there. I wanted to see which kind of segregation we have in Mexico City, just for an example. And it was very interesting what we found. This study was carried out by a PhD student of mine, who's Janet. Janet collected the data, socioeconomical data, where they have a poverty index. The higher the index was, that meant the lower, the poorer the region was. So we divided the city in these counties, so we call them municipalities in Mexico City. And then what we said is, okay, we are going to color each municipality by the number of COVID cases that we have there. Okay, but that's in this moment not that important. But the circle color refers to this poverty index, as I said. So the darker the circle is, the lower the index is. So the poorer is this municipality. And the radius of this circle refers to the number of visits in the region. And then we have this network, and then we put these random walks many times until we saw what are the places or municipalities that are more segregated. And it's, as you can see in this plot, you will see a municipality in the south that is called Milpa Alta, where you can not even observe the circle. The circle is so small, but so small, that you cannot even see it. It's not there because there are no visits, almost no visits. No, there is no way people go there. Like probably the people who go there are just the ones who live there, but it doesn't receive visits. And well, it's not the same, for example, with neighboring municipalities, where even though they are very far, they still receive visits. So we were wondering whether this has to do with sorry, I changed the other slides with the subway map, for example. As you can see there in this map, these are all the stations that are in the subway. So of course, like it only covers basically the upper part of Mexico City or the central part of Mexico City, but not the southern part. And that has something to do with also what kind of people live there and this poverty index. And if you compare, so the other thing that we were studying is the intramobility. So we say, okay, here we already studied like how many people come from outside to this municipality, but now we want to see how much the people move inside the municipality. And then I would like you to have a look at two municipalities. So in this one, as I show you, Milpa Alta basically received no visits. And Iztacalco, which is, let me see if I can point with this, with my mouse, no? But it's basically on the north right, very right of the plot. So that's the segregation map. So if you see Milpa Alta and Iztacalco, so one receives a lot of visits, Milpa Alta no visits. If you go to here, now you observe intramobility. So now we have the opposite effect. So Milpa Alta has a lot of intramobility, while Iztacalco has like no intramobility. And what we thought is maybe this epidemiological, also the epidemiological data related to this has to do also with the different dynamics of infecting, because one municipality has more or less the same number of cases of COVID, but however, the way people behave is very different. So probably in some cases, the cases were imported. In other cases, the people were moving a lot inside the municipality, and that's how they infect each other. Well, that's just the idea for COVID. But basically, what we observe here is that we have a type of segregation, and this segregation has to do a lot with this poverty index. Then Oscar, who was a postdoc in my group, also studied. He did some statistics on these networks. He was trying to identify which kind of distribution was following the node degree and the strength degree of these networks, and trying to model these distributions. And he found basically with one function that is distribution beta rank function, that there are two regimes. That means there are group of nodes that have very high connections, many connections to other regions, while other nodes have very few connections. So there are these two regimes. The pink nodes that you see here are above the mode, so they have many connections, while the blue nodes here are below the mode. That means it has very few connections. So that means all the region that is in the middle of Mexico City, in this case is greater Mexico City, so also with their surrounding municipalities, have lots of connections in the center, while the ones in the periphery have very few connections. Could you repeat? It's the south, so it's going to Cuernavaca. So it's the one that it's going to Cuernavaca. So it seems there are some municipalities that are part of this greater Mexico City. And then we were thinking, okay, so we observed two regimes, but what does it mean as well? we also cross this data with also socioeconomic level, and we observe what are the regions that change dynamics after the lockdown. We don't see many differences, but what we can observe is that people who are rich or who have a high or very high socioeconomic level didn't change at all. They didn't have to change at all their habits or anything. While the people who were in the low or lower or medium socioeconomic level, they were really affected. So the orange have, in this case, is the strength, is the not the strength. That means like the number of people who are leaving from this place or coming to this place. This is the strength of a node. And you can, as you can see, it changed before the lockdown to after the lockdown. And those were the only regions, let's say, or where the people where the people with a low socioeconomic level live. So then we try to correlate the human mobility with epidemiological information, and we had a look at other cities. This was made mainly by a collaborator, Guillermo de Anda, where he observed that, for example, this is a look at other cities again on Mother's Day, where you can see in the city the places. So when you see these bars is where people met, where there were a lot of people meeting. And in the next plot, you see the epidemiological cases. So you see that's Mother's Day, the first bar, and then how this was increasing in the following weeks, the cases. So that's another example. Cuernavaca, it had a different dynamics, and we did the same observation for the metropolitan cities in Mexico. What was very interesting is that we didn't see a pattern. We didn't see that, okay, this was Mother's Day, everybody went out to celebrate mom, and then the following week or the 2 following weeks, the cases increased everywhere. We didn't see that. We saw that there was just a different dynamics in every city. What we also explore is the mobility networks among municipalities. What we did now, we built this network, this same network, where nodes are municipalities. And so we were observing movement between municipalities, and we were comparing these networks along this 2-year period. Here I'm just showing you the networks of 9 days in this 2-year period. But basically we have this 700 or almost 800 networks. And here is again, so I'm just showing what the mobility was before the lockdown, which in Mexico was declared in about March, the pandemics, and then it went down and very, very much down. And then when holidays came in July, then it increased a little bit, and then again it decreased, and so on. So now since May 2021, then we are seeing like increasing the mobility in Mexico. So here what I wanted to show you is that we had this spotlight, this epidemiological spotlight. I don't know if you have it here or you have it in your country, but basically it was telling us like, we are all in red, we stay at home and nobody can go shopping. But if we change from red to orange, that means like the restrictions were a little bit loose, and then yellow were a little bit looser, and green was almost like back to normal. And we were comparing whether this had an effect on how people behave, how people move. And we compare, I would like you to focus mainly on the plot on the right, which is again not the strength, like how many people are moving. And we can see the states of Mexico. As you can see, there is no pattern, And you can see that if it's red, that means that the mobility increased. If it's blue, mobility decreased. And if it's gray, there was no significant impact. As you can see, there are states like San Luis Potosí or Nuevo León in the north, or Jalisco, where there was no impact. It didn't matter which spotlight they had, they didn't stop, they didn't change the dynamics at all. In some places, it decreased, like Hidalgo or like Yucatan, where they seem to be more obedient, maybe, to the government. And this is basically the same study, just during the time, just to see what was the mobility patterns for every state according to the epidemiological spotlight. We expected to see that whenever there was red, so the curves were very low, and orange a little bit higher, and yellow a little bit higher, and green. But basically, we don't see that pattern in all in the states, and actually, every state has a very different dynamics. This plot is just to show you that we can also do art with these networks. But actually, what we are showing here is we are detecting communities. To make it clearer, I will show you here. I will show you here. So the first bar is the different states of Mexico. And every thread leaving from one of these colors is a municipality. So what we did is, during all this 2-year period, we were detecting communities in the network, meaning if the whole network is one whole community, that means everybody was moving to every place. Like there was there was no more movement inside the region than in the whole country. When you see the formation of communities, that means people started like moving more inside their neighboring regions than outside of this. So this is very common when there are outbreaks, that communities start forming in these mobility networks to form what are called functional regions. And this is something that we were investigating, whether the pandemics have triggered the formation of these functional regions, where we do actually observe in some states. For example, in Campeche and Nuevo León, which are the richest states of Mexico, nothing basically changed a long time. So, while in Oaxaca and Chiapas, which are in the south of Mexico and are the poorer states of Mexico, this actually did happen, that the formation of communities occur, and therefore we hypothesize that we have functional regions there. One important thing that we were observing, or that we wanted to investigate, is the visits to hospitals, because I don't know how it was in your countries, but in Mexico, it happened that people arrived to one hospital and it was full, and then they had to move to another hospital, and it was like people were doing like pilgrims, you know, So we wanted to see how the mobility changed in Mexico, and also this could help us to see, when we see a lot of movement towards a hospital, that meant that the number of cases are increasing. But what we also think is that if there is a hospital that can be open to anyone in the country, and if we can see where the people come from which regions of Mexico they come, from which municipalities they come, from which social economical levels they come, then we can attend better their necessities. So this is something that we would like to do. Haven't done yet, but this is something that is important for, I think, for public health. So this is only the number of visits at the hospital. three hospitals that were of interest for the government. We were investigating along the time, and we also basically investigated all the hospitals in Mexico City, and we could see which ones are the ones who received more visits and which ones were the ones that didn't receive very much visits. And where you see like there are some vertical bars that you can actually identify there. This actually correlated with the peaks of the pandemics. I don't know. So here, one of the hospitals was very much of interest for this funding organization, and we wanted to see where people come from those hospitals, for that hospital, exactly for that hospital. And so I couldn't do this so perfect to not to move, but those points identify the people, where the people are coming from. So you will have only one hospital is fixed, and the points are where people were coming from. So as you can see, this is also strange, because the hospital was more or less here, but many people from all over the Mexico City and surroundings were also moving to that hospital. One other thing that we wanted to show is if we ignore the social distancing, what would happen? And this is exactly what happened in an entertainment park in Mexico that was reopened exactly in the middle of the pandemic. And this is the day of the reopening, basically. We have here, you can see this the entertainment park, and that's the polygon that shows the entertainment park. And then you will start seeing dots, red dots, where people start filling the park. So people were having fun. That's the inauguration day. And then they started leaving, right? And they started spreading in the city, and they started having contact with other people. And the people where they had contacts with, they also had contact with other people, and so on. So the red dots are people who were in the entertainment park. Then you start seeing some blue dots that are the ones who were in contact with the ones in the entertainment park, and then the yellow ones are the were in contact. So so first neighbors and then second neighbors of this network. And you can see that basically at some point, like the whole city is already has already been somehow in contact with the people who were in this park. We only try to send a message to the people, like try to avoid these events, because these are like super spreaders super spreader. But basically, this kind of study can be applied to many other problems, right? So finally, I just wanted to mention that these studies, so part of these studies have been sent to for publication. So we are waiting for response, but they can be found in archive, and we hope to have this study accepted. I would like to thank all this team. It's a really big team of researchers and students who have put a lot of effort and a lot of work on this. Not all of them I show them during the talk, but for example, Alfredo and Amika are people who have been always like putting the back end for this to work. And also this funding agency, which is a project in collaboration with Uruguay. And well, with that, I like to finish, and thank you very much for your attention.
Anybody have a question for Maribel? Nina?
The data science course is WIMSA, the veterans verification program. And that is because patient information is always expensive. But if you check to see if any other city in the world is similar to the local data.
We haven't done that. It would be very interesting. So the point is that the data set is so big. So we do have data from other countries, not from the US, for example, but we have from whole Latin America, from some countries in Europe and some in countries in Asia. But these data sets are just huge and difficult to handle. We don't have also enough funds to place them to store them, to analyze them. But that will be definitively very interesting. That was the idea to do it with Uruguay. We already do have the data. We need yes, where to put it. Thank you.
So is this the last talk, Mina? Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Well, I guess an applause to everybody and especially also to Mina for the organization of all of this. And we'll see you tomorrow to continue.